Hello. I would like to give you guys a probably final update on my tri-stack crit crossbow build. Over the past few days, I've given some short clip updates on how the build's going and updated POBs. So originally, I think I was doing I was basing my damage off of tooltip, and then once tooltip kind of became irrelevant, then I started doing POB DPS. But I think at the start I was doing whatever 20 million DPS, and now I'm sustaining over 92 million, and then I can burst for more than that. And so, disclaimer. Yes, I know that you do not need this much damage, and if you're making a build in Path of Exile 2 right now, that if you're not using Double Herald tech with Temporalis Blink, then you're stupid, at least when it comes to mapping. But currently, I'm not really playing the game. I'm not killing mobs, I'm more hideout warrioring, just because I've I don't know done hundreds of maps and I find it a little bit boring if the meta doesn't shift or if GGG doesn't come out with newer content. So kind of just crafting and AFKing. But if you were to be doing mapping, then obviously yes, as everyone's saying, yes, double Herald tech with Temporalis is the best way, and having 100 million DPS is overkill. But I will show you this overkill damage because again, I'm kind of creating builds not for the current meta, it's to preemptively create a build that will survive future patches. So, if there's a reset in a month, then people can look at these videos and say, oh, well, now bosses live a minute like GGE wants them to, and oh, now I need a very high DPS build. And so, this build will survive. So, with that out of the way, I will quickly go over most of the gear. Again, it's a tri-stacking build. Some of these items will survive. They will probably be nerfed, but again, it's Hand of Wisdom in action and then stat stacking. Just quick overview. Pretty much everyone's more or less using the same stuff. The only confusing part of it will be the weapons. So I do a weapon swap to apply a 100% shock, and my weapon swap is now a cast on crit setup, and it also applies exposure. So I'm doing that with a bow and arrow, and the skill that I'm using to shock is Stormcaller. So the stats on the bow really doesn't matter. I mean, shock is, I'm pretty sure, based on the damage that you do, but since Stormcaller Arrow has like an 800% inbuilt more multiplier for shock, and also our weapon swap tree gives additional shock chance, that pretty much any damage on this bow is irrelevant because we're using Hand of Wisdom in action. So the only two modifiers that are important on this is crit chance, because our weapon swap does proc cast on crit, and attack speed, so that we can proc more cast on crit procs per second when we're switched. So those are the only two modifiers, and that's the same thing with your quiver. All you do is want crit chance and attack speed. So my Stormcaller arrow, I'm doing fast forward just because it's a 1.5 second delay for the second shocking proc to happen. So this is 30% less for that 1.5 seconds. And then I'm just having additional shock supports. So more shock, longer shock, and then applying an exposure to get 74% pen, which is what I currently have. And then also, my weapon swap, I disabled my Herald and Wind Dancer that I use for my crossbow, and I do cast on crit. So I'm using cast on crit to spawn Eye of Winters because this debuffs the boss for 10% increased crit chance, which is doubling your crit chance because it's additive to your weapon crit chance. So that's really good. And then I do deceleration, so the mob gets hit by more of the debuffing projectiles, and then I just have double energy um, generators so that I can proc more Eye of Winters. So that's really good. The weapon swap is kind of insane because I'm applying a 100% shock, which is a 100% more damage multiplier. I'm also, with Eye of Wintering, doubling my crit chance, so that's another 100% more multiplier. and then I'm giving it exposure. So my weapon swap is actually giving me like 4.5 times damage, and I have to do that every 8 seconds or so because my shock and my exposure last 8 seconds. Which I mean, I attack it like 20 times a second, so the swapping to the bow isn't a huge DPS loss. So that's my weapon swap tech. And now the pretty confusing part is what stats do you want on your actual crossbow? So here's two examples of two weapons that pretty much have similar DPS, but they have drastically different modifiers. So let's look at this one first. This one, its prefixes are very, very good. The perfect prefixes are percent fizz, fizz damage, and then weapon elemental damage. But this one has lightning damage instead of fizz damage. Whatever, it doesn't matter. All of them are like extremely, extremely high rolls. It's like pretty much perfect prefixes, uh, which is nice. But then the suffixes are, I mean, not terrible, but they're not great, as I will show. So we have crit chance, which is mandatory, um, but it's not the highest roll, and then the plus levels isn't the highest roll of 7. So this is like perfect prefixes and then okay-ish suffixes, because I mean you can get suffixes like this for a divine probably. I mean T2, Dex, and +6. I mean that's a divine. So this is equivalent to this item is equivalently good as this crossbow. So opposite to this crossbow, these prefixes pretty much suck. The cold damage is literally worthless. It's 2 to 4. The fizz damage is pretty much worthless. Again, it's only 20% increased fizz damage. And then the lightning damage is pretty decent, but lightning damage isn't like insane. Like Wed or the combination of fizz damage and increased fizz damage is better than just straight lightning damage. So these prefixes basically suck. But again, it's equivalently good as this crossbow. But what makes up for it is the suffixes. So the suffixes are insane. This is the best crit chance that you can get. It's the best crit or crit bonus that you can get, and it's the second best proj levels that you can get. So this is just to say that it's really hard to suggest specific modifiers for your crossbow. You just, I don't know, have to whisper people and then copy it into Path of Building and then determine if it is good for your build. Because again, depending on how much gear you have, will determine if you need more increased flat damage or percent damage, or if you need more crit chance, or if you have an Adorn setup with a lot of crit chance or crit multi, then your crit damage bonus will be a lot better. So there's a bunch of modifiers that are good for crossbows. These are just two opposite examples of what I show that they're equivalently as good. So that's all the gear. So I guess I'll just go through the gems quickly. I guess they're in the POV, but this build is basically revolving around more or less fresh clip. So fresh clip gives you a ton more damage because we're attacking at 25 or 27 times a second. Supposedly, there is a attack speed cap. It's either 30 attacks per second or 33 attacks per second. I'm not sure which one it is, but we get below this. I mean, shock burst is going to be the thing that's going to be an issue with attack speed caps because it has a 450% attack speed multiplier. So to combat this, I basically don't have any attack speed on the tree because if I did have more attack speed, then I would get past the cap, obviously. And we also socket in Scatter Shot. So without Scatter Shot, I would be attacking at like 35 or 36 times a second. This is lowering me below the attack speed cap to like 26 or something, which is great. So this downside, the downside of less attack speed is not actually a downside because I already have too much attack speed. But also, Shock Burst actually shotguns, so every single shot that I do, I shoot 3 times, and all 3 projectiles hit the target. So this Scatter Shot is actually like a 60% more damage multiplier, so this gem is insane at very, very high levels of investment. If you have a lower budget, you probably won't be very close to the attack speed cap. Like I have 36 attacks per second or 35 something without the scatter shot. If you have worse gear, maybe you'll even without scatter shot, you still won't be hitting the attack speed cap. But either way, scatter shot's really good. So shock burst is my single target. Obviously set up, and the target has to be shocked for you to do damage. And I shock with my arrow again in my weapon swap. Galvanic shards. This is just my clear speed, or my clear skill. I'll just go through. It's just basically generic damage. And also on my passive tree, I take you can use double supports, so that's why I'm able to use double fresh clip, because I'm taking gem studded. We already went through the Stormcaller arrow, my Herald Thunder. Again, since I have double supports, I can put really good double supports in my Herald of Thunder, so it probably does like 30 to 40% of my damage, and also it makes my clear better because when I kill a mob, then it AoEs with the Herald of Thunder, so it gives me better clear. But obviously, as I said at the beginning, if you were going to do just spam maps over and over and over, you want a Temporalis and you want Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice if you want to min max, min max, min max. But I don't have it, and my clear is perfectly fine. Sure, I may be a little bit slower, but if I'm opening up a breach, I'm killing 80% of the mobs anyway, so whatever. And also, Temporalis probably will get nerfed, so we'll see. Again, just damage sports, and then innervate whenever I kill a shock target, which is pretty much all the time. I have this up pretty much 100% of the time. I get 35% more damage on my Galvanic Shards. Wind Dancer, this is just a defensive layer. There's not much better auras that I can run, and so I just run Clarity, Precision, because accuracy gets converted to attack speed, Cannibalism, because I'm killing a bunch of mobs per second, and then Unbreakable. I don't know if this actually works, but supposedly you get stunned less when you stick it in Wind Dancer, so I do that. I already covered my cast on crit. This is only being used when I swap to my bow. Emergency reload. This button's really weird. You think it does a lot of damage, but actually doesn't really do that much damage. I mean, sure, you'll have 45% more damage for 26 shots. So when I'm spamming shock burst rounds, when I use my 26 rounds here and it goes to 1, once I'm almost out of ammo, I can reload, and then those reloaded bolts do like 45% more damage. But since I attack at 30 times a second, and this reload is like a 36-second cooldown or something like that, like I'm only getting a 45% more damage for 3% of the time. So emergency reload like kind of actually sucks. It's not really good. I just have it. Voltaic Mark. When I'm shocking with my Stormcaller arrow, I think my base shock is like 74% or something, and then when I mark the target, this increases it by 45%, and it goes up to 100% shock. And then if you're really min-maxing and degenerate, and you want to one-shot bosses, here's a setup for Rip Wire Ballista. You can just place this down, and then you can stand next to it, and you get Rage. So it's good for one-shotting bosses, I guess, but if you have any movement during the boss fight in upcoming patches, this Ballista basically is going to be worthless. So I just have it. As for the passive tree, nothing really changed. I'm in a Dorn setup. I have 4 crit chance jewels, and then 5 crit damage jewels. There's like whatever an even split between crit chance and crit damage, because that's what POB says is the best optimal damage. Here I have an Against the Darkness because it's hitting 4 different things. Damage is not optimal by taking these nodes, but I get Strength, which is HP, and it's nice, and I get increased or blind chance and blind effect. So damage wise, this isn't efficient, but tankiness and damage wise, it is efficient. I dropped the lucky lucky lightning damage because I have a lot of crit chance, so this became inefficient. This is my weapon swap. My weapon swap, I'm picking up all these shock nodes. My weapon shop, my weapon swap, these shock nodes, these shock nodes. That's how I'm getting a 100% shock chance. And then I just pick up crit and crit. So that is the build. Again, in POB will be in the description of my setup, and then a perfect setup. The perfect setup, I think, is close to a 250 million DPS, which is pretty good. So, yep. If you have any comments, put them in the comments and I'll go to them. Thanks.